And record. I'm happy to facilitate unless someone else wants to. All right, awesome. So pulling this up. Status updates. I can quickly share. I think in the past week, it's been a lot of looking at the couple PRs. So the PR to flip, analyze, and detect. I put that on the agenda today because I was hoping we could talk about the different ways we could go about it. I also just put up a PR for exec-D on Windows. And I can't remember anything else, so I will pass the baton.
Yeah, I've been working on the PR to flip, analyze, and detect mostly. That was sort of I'm really after getting able to validate stack for the build packs. That's kind of my goal. But since we have to flip these first to do some of the validation, I went ahead and got back on that. So I'm just going to work through the PR issues as we discussed them. So.
I worked on the opt-in layer caching. I hope to put a PR today.
I haven't been working on the lifecycle too much, but I have tried to take a look at some of the bigger PRs that are coming in at this point. And thanks for putting up the spec PR, Jesse. It really helped me just to see the interface changes separately from all the other stuff.
Yeah, probably should have started with that, to be honest.
I've been working on the cache image fix. Oh, my video froze again. But the it's driving out a little bit of the constructor change for image util, so that you can make OS specific images just from the new image call. It's moving along okay. I think it's all working now. I just need to clean up some of the commits. It did drive out some of the with platform stuff, so we do technically have some knobs in there to pick the right images or to deal with manifest lists now. But I'll tidy it up and put it in a little bit more presentable format. That's it for me.
Any other updates? If not, we can move on to release planning. I can share my screen. Maybe we just take a quick look at the milestone and see what's there. Yeah. You can see this. Cycle. Okay, so here's the milestone. And I think everything with a face is, well, Jesse's current work is in support of this. And actually, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you picked this up yet, right? The retries.
I've not. Sorry.
But just getting a state of the world at the moment. Is there anything, just looking at this, I feel like the ones that are currently being worked on will probably, Jesse's might take a little longer, but the other ones are kind of moving apace. So do we want to make any guesses as to when we might be able to ship, or any decisions about what should go in the release? Or just continue best effort?
Best effort seems fine to me, but yeah, I would definitely say the validate stack IDs is at risk just because of how big a change it is to swap the analyzer. And we still probably need to discuss that just in general. It's like, how do we release that? make sure that Javier and team of Pack are like ready to do that, because I assume we're gonna have to ship before Pack ships, but
That's gonna be interesting to do the validation.
Some questions about that. Because we're trying to get this in now, I moved the spec issue from, it was like originally pointed at the 07 milestone, but I moved it to 06. But I think in that RFC are a lot of features that we sort of just like described in a sentence in the RFC. Like we're going to check the write access. We're going to validate the run image. And I think that was appropriate for the RFC, but I'm wondering if at some point, like we want to, like, do we want to break that up, or are we going to try to get all of that into the spec 06 and the next lifecycle release? I think it's a question.
I'm wondering, do we have to introduce this as part of the zeros? I mean, the next release, or can we also do it like in lifecycle 0, 12? Not that I want to move it to the next release. I'm just wondering if there is a reason to push it in in lifecycle 0, 11.
yeah, it's a good question, because we could actually do part of like the lifecycle should validate stack IDs. We could do the first part of that in 06. I could probably go and probably wrap that work up relatively quickly, even without swapping the order of detector and analyzer, because we already have the stack in the build packs. It would happen at detect, and it would be similar to what pack does now, but some of the additional things in that issue require the swapping of them. So we could like divvy this up a little bit differently if we thought it made sense.
I guess the reason I moved the spec up to the newer milestone is because the PR is open, right? So if we want to merge these changes in, we need the spec and the lifecycle to be consistent. I don't have a strong preference about whether we do it all now, all later, or part now and part later, as long as we like do a good job documenting what is going where and breaking out issues if we're punting on things, so that we are explicit and don't forget about them.
Yeah, same. I just kind of want to do the work whenever we think makes sense. So if someone has an opinion, I'm willing to follow whatever that is. 06, 07, a little bit of both. Doesn't really matter to me.
I know Joe was fairly antsy to get some of these changes in. But I don't feel.
Yeah, that shouldn't drive us, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable merging without an explicit plan for the spec, like what's going to go in each version, because I think we could get ourselves in a confusing situation.
And do we want to pop should validate stack IDs onto 012, or do we want to do part of that and break up the part that we can't do now into another issue? Like what's your gut feeling there, somebody?
It's a good question. My gut feeling is like, let's just cram it all into 011, although it will slow things down because we've made a serious commitment to do all of stack packs in 07, the API 07 and lifecycle 12, right? I think getting this groundwork there will make that easier. Otherwise, 12 is going to be a bit of a bear. But that's just like a light opinion. Like I could be talked out of it. At the end of the day, I don't have a really strong preference here, other than a preference for organization. Does anyone else have a stronger preference?
I share your slight preference. I will add, well, so we were, I think maybe it's already been moved, but we were kind of feeling uncertain that the Windows SID stuff would make this release. Maybe that's something that we should, if we're going to do this phase reversal and extend the, ship date for 011, maybe that gives us more room to also do the Windows stuff.
Yeah, just haven't really done much on the SID piece yet, so there is all of that still to do. And there's not really any work that would be impacted by waiting.
I think as long as we're not, sitting idle, right? Like waiting for the phase reversal to go through. Like there's plenty of stuff we can pick up in the meantime. Like I think maybe we should just aim for that. And then if we find that it's taking really long and we want to unblock ourselves, and we can just decide differently. We didn't talk about the patch we were going to ship. I know we were sort of waiting to see if we could get the GGCR bump in that, but
Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that. I asked Matt more and he told me to ask the Knative Slack channel, and then I spent a while trying to recover my password to Knative Slack and then got distracted and haven't asked yet, but I can do that right after this.
awesome. All right. I think we've covered release planning. So I guess next on is needs discussion, which, we had this, was this just remaining from last week? This label, I think I forgot to take it off. We talked about it last week. And Micah, that's a draft PR.
Yeah, I think I think there's a slot at the end of the agenda for that one, but I don't know if it was still in need of first discussion.
Oh, I see. Oh, interesting. Okay. I guess let's do we want to talk about that now, or should we? Did you add this, Micah?
I actually didn't add it. I was about to add it, and I saw someone had something that looked almost identical there, but.
Very cool. Okay. I guess let's just keep going with our list. No, I did this already. Where is it? RFCs. I think we're probably no RFCs. So we can go to our first agenda item, setting flags.
Yeah. So I put this after a very short discussion that we had, in our team, the stand-up today. So it's still regarding the same opt-in layer caching issue. According to the RFC, for Buildpack API less than 0.6, we would like to, I think you also talked about it here like 2 weeks ago, maybe. So we would like to send a warning to the Buildpack author in case they set the launch or cache or build flags inside the types table, because we started supporting the types table from Buildpack API 0.6. And for Buildpack API 0.6 and up, we would like to fail if the user set one of these flags at the top level. Now, my question was whether we want to fail or warn also when the user set the flag to false, because in this case, we don't care, right? Usually the user won't set it to false, because if they don't set it at all, then it's considered as false. But if they do set it as false in the wrong place, so do we still want to warn and to fail, or do we just want to ignore it? Or what do we want to do? And then when I brought this up in our team, then I mean, it's possible to do this. It's not like the way we're doing it right now, right? Because when we're like decoding TOML file, we'll just set it to false if we're doing it in like the simplest way. I'm sure there is a way to like check whether the user set it to false or whether it was not in the file and then automatically it was set to false. I'm just wondering, do we want to do it at all? And then Ali brought up that maybe we'll just do some refactoring regarding the decoding of TOML files. So anyway, if someone has some thoughts about it, I would love to hear.
My first instinct is it's not necessary. Like there's no behavior that the Buildpack author thinks they're getting that they're not getting.
That's
So
right.
it like we definitely want to warn rather than ignore things so that Buildpack authors know that like if they express an intention and we're not going to take it seriously, then they need to know about it. But if they get the same result anyways, I feel like they just don't need to.
So for Buildpack API, lesson 06 will warn if it set it inside a type table. And for Buildpack API 06 and up will fail if it set it at the top level. But yeah, from one hand, I mean, it's like the user didn't intend to do anything. So when he set it to false, so that's fine. We can theoretically just ignore it. But maybe it's just like not that clean to ignore it. I don't know. It just
it's a little weird, I would say, but I think I agree with Emily. But it would be nice, like if the parser like had a list of warnings, like if we were to like use pointers there and figure out that the intent of whether they actually said it or not, and then being able to like have a collection of warnings to omit or something based on the version. But I don't think it's worth it right now.
Yeah, I lean to what Nelly mentioned in our stand-up. Nelly, maybe you want to say more about it, but I think it doesn't worth it right now. And if we'll make some changes like sometime in the future, maybe it's worth to like more clear and more like consistent all over our files. So we'll know if we need to warn or we need to fail or whatever. Does anyone else have some thought about?
I agree with what you said. I think what we're doing now is okay. And then in the future we'll make it better.
Cool. That's it. Thank you.
All right, the next one that I put was to analyze, detect PR. I put that there because we had sort of floated the idea in the PR comments of a re-architecture. And I was wondering if we could sort of express what that might look like and whether it's needed. Personally, all the conditionals in the code, it's hard to follow. I worry that we'll make, I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm worried about, but it's hard to follow.
Oh, I'm worried too.
I agree with that. I'm loath to make something that's already going to be hard to get in any harder by requiring a re-architecture. But I also worry that if we don't do it, we're going to make our lives miserable in the long run.
Yeah, I took some steps yesterday with creating a couple classes to interfaces to sort of express some stuff that's shared between, like the metadata parser from cache and like the layer analyzer bits that actually do the layer analyzing, so that that weird things like the analyzer referencing the restore isn't happening anymore, and it makes the test a little bit cleaner because you can mock out those interfaces instead of having to set up those additional structs. And so that helps a little bit. I still have some concern about like we probably need to be pushing those into like an internal package or something, because I don't really want to grow our surface area. Like I have some concerns around that, but it would be nice to kind of know what steps to take to kind of get this over the line. So we have the minimum sort of viable architecture that we're okay with pushing through. I don't mind doing some additional work here, but it's kind of flying blind. It's really kind of the first big PR that I've done in this project. So I don't really want to like rewrite the world, but have a goal in mind.
Yeah, I do wonder if like maybe we want to, if we're gonna rewrite the world, we might even want to do it as a separate PR on its own without all the other changes. I have some ideas. I feel like I would need to play with them to know how good they are. I'm wondering if like maybe what we want is really explicit, like a package for each API version. And then they can share a lot of internal stuff. And like maybe that means every time we have an API version, we're like copy pasting a bunch of things over, but I don't mind as long as we can call into a shared package for complicated stuff. I don't mind that kind of duplication in order for it to be explicit and easy to track changes over time.
You had similar thoughts. I was actually just asking some folks internally here about like testing, because I will say that's the biggest annoyance in doing this right now is that our testing for me is set up. It's just really hard to write tests, especially when you're juggling multiple platform versions, because we have a lot of duplicated tests because we sometimes like to make tests underneath a when statement for a particular platform API, but then sometimes we don't. And it's because setups get complicated and mocks get complicated. And so we sort of have this duality of testing and you never know which one to pick. It always seems like you're picking the wrong one. And so I kind of wish that tests themselves were similarly, like you were saying, like I want to test only against O3 and O4 and O5. And then like we can have some helpers that allow us to share the complicated setups and stuff like that. Because right now, I'm sure there's a matrix that we're missing in some cases where like we're testing greater than this and less than this, but then like we're only doing it in certain tests. So it'd be nice if the test suite were more comprehensive, I guess, in that regard.
Definitely for the unit tests. I feel like, although that would be nice, the acceptance tests will get too slow.
Yeah, for sure.
We definitely shouldn't do this as part of the refactor, but I wonder if eventually our code base is a code base that lends itself more to table tests than the style we're doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, or there's something, this is what they use in like, they use like some scripts, some test data scripts in like the main Go project that sort of set up the world. Anyway, it's something to kind of explore when we do decide to take on some testing changes that would allow us to potentially set up things like the architecture as well as the platform API, and potentially have scripts that sort of set up some stuff and then execute the test so that we can have a single copy of each test and then some variables that come from the outside in. And, you know, for things like platform APIs that don't support something anymore, you would do it like we do Windows now, where we would skip a test because it's not valid on that, and you would write that in the test instead of having a block that omits that test.
Even if the first pass at breaking this up looked like, you know, for a new API, we copy paste the entire test file and then make some changes. Like maybe we don't refactor the tests to use shared stuff right away. Yeah. But given that we shouldn't be modifying older APIs, it'll create a lot of code that we might want to refactor later, but I don't think it'll create a lot of problems because we won't be going and changing the old one.
Yeah, I like that. Like, I wish we had a like detector test for like every platform version that had a change in it, right? You still might go from like 01 to like 03 because maybe you didn't do anything in 02, but only copy when something changes. But it would, the mental overhead of having to juggle all of those at the same time is absurd. So it would be nice to like start somewhere with like the version you're working on and see what broke.
Does that, like, given that we have this PR open, do we have a path forward?
I still think there's at least some architecture work to do to get this across the line around the conditionals with like the cache being nil, especially. and not being nailed, depending on the caller. Like I think creating something there. I don't know what, I'll have to take a look at that to figure out what it looks like again. But I think we're going to need to have like 2 entry points at least for like pre-image cache and post-image cache removal or something like that, and be very explicit about that.
Like, would it be worth, I mean, playing around with copying the existing analyzer to be like analyzer 05 and then having an analyzer 06 and just see how bad it is? I mean, sure, we could move a lot of shared stuff into an analyzer, internal analyzer or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, what do we think? I'm willing to try anything out. I just kind of want to know that we're heading towards the direction that we think we're going to like. I know that's kind of hard to imagine, but
I lean more towards packages than names with the API version in our existing packages. I'm happy to help and spike out some of this because I'm pretty interested in this problem, but I won't really have time until the beginning of next week to be particularly useful there.
that's fine too. I'm actually kind of concerned about my time commitment. Like on this, like next week, I've got to spike out some stuff internally here, and so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to like do anything past tomorrow for life cycle. Like all of next week may be dead time, so I'm not convinced we're going to be able to get this across the line next week anyway.
This might be a good time to mention what I forgot earlier, which is that I'll be out next week. So
Enjoy.
So maybe we'll circle back on this. Maybe add anyone who has thoughts on how this could go, or add them in a place where we can all see them, maybe PR or Slack or whatever.
I'll continue kind of playing around with that PR and at least kind of factor out some of the bad things that it probably does now, and then if we want to copy paste test or copy paste into another package, we can kind of port some of this stuff over. It's fine if we decide that that's worth it before we ship, but I'll get it kind of ready in a state that could be reviewed and shipped if we decided not to move forward with the refactor.
I guess we can move on to talk about multi-OS asset cache images.
Yeah. So
Oh, go for
I
it.
put this up. I put this up here. 'Cause
Out
I
of
knew you were
scope.
gonna be here, Micah.
I feel like we don't have multi-OS build packs,
Yeah.
and we don't have multi-OS asset caches yet. I feel like we gotta solve both those problems at the same time, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. So Natalie brought this up at our stand-up, and it sounded like a pretty low risk place to do some like spiking and release some stuff that has this behavior in it. And so yeah, like I know you have a mountain of stuff on your plate. No, I've never seen it. I just know that's true. So yeah, if you have any time to
So just so I understand this, this is you would like to have an image on a registry that could contain assets and be used by like Windows or Linux platforms. Like it would just contain like build pack caches, or
yeah. So it would contain assets. And it's a little weird since like if I'm giving you a Go binary, you probably don't want the same thing for Windows and Linux. But and they'll probably look a little bit different. But I think there are some things in the Paketo ecosystem right now that could benefit from something like this.
I see.
Have to do a little bit more validation. But yeah, I was just putting this out there in case it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so if you did want that, and these images, you wanted them to be pullable, Docker pullable, and you wanted to combine layers that way, you end up getting stuck with a kind of a quirky image layer type or image layer format. You can get pretty far by just omitting the OS flag on the image config entirely. Then any daemon that pulls it down just makes it its own OS. I think the same is probably true for architecture. So if you just had a image that had almost an entirely blank config for the OS architecture, OS version, all those ones, it should be pullable. But you could, but then as far as the layers go, you need layers that are both rooted at / and have a files prefix. I have a prototype that does pretty much all this same stuff. And then there's hard links between the two, actually maybe symlinks, that makes it work with both. But the quirky bit is that it's a very strange image to inspect. It's, for the most part, it looks like a Linux image. But if you don't require it to be Docker pullable, then maybe you have some other options. Technically, we had a bug already with Pack where Windows builds were pulling in Linux cache images, and it was all working just fine. We didn't actually realize it was making Linux images all along. But we're technically going to undo that feature. But yeah, there's not a lot that would get in the way of doing what you described. It would just end up in kind of a weird with weird image formats, and we hadn't played around with them too much. But I think you kind of hit on the head, is we'd want to validate that a shared cache actually does make sense. Like a Windows app would use the same as a Linux, and that the benefits would outweigh the strangeness of it all.
Okay, all right. I'm wondering if you could Slack me or shoot me wherever this prototype lives, just so I can look at it a little bit. That'd be
Yeah, for sure.
great. But okay, all right. I just wanted to bring that up. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, can I ask, just on this topic, for historical context for me, I guess I'm wondering why we chose to store things on the registry this way. I believe manifest has manifest lists, right? That could essentially just point to different images for different OS types, right? And then it can be sort of be handled transparently to the user, right? So I guess I'm just wondering why this direction was chosen for, historic for me, who's just sort of joining.
For even like the need for a cache image as opposed to a volume, or this OS specific cache images.
Just not even cache images, just multi-OS images in a registry, period, right?
Oh, I'm pretty sure this is a. Oh, is that to Dan? We don't actually use them internally anywhere. This is just my idea.
Yeah, my bad. I thought we were already storing multi-OS images in registries right now. That's what I thought was happening, but I guess not yet.
Not in any production implementation. It's just really in this prototype I came up with, was able to make a build package that has no OS set on it, and the layers are technically compatible with any daemon.
Okay. No build packages are being stored on any registries today. Is that correct statement?
Sorry, there's build packages. The OS specific build packages are stored on registries. Those you'd make like a pack build -- publish.
Yeah.
No, wait, that's not right. Pack build package -- publish. I think. Folks will have to verify that. I might be making that up. I think that's the command to make them though.
Right.
Yeah, I think the multi-OS image idea literally it just came from our stand-up of like, oh, you're having a problem with Windows images. Maybe ask Micah. He had this crazy idea. Like, I think that's the stage we're at right now.
And
It's all good.
yeah,
I
I
wonder if
should.
it's like 1 degree too clever. And like what we really want is just a manifest list, like Anthony said, with a Windows image and a Linux image, and they can share almost every layer. Well, I guess the Windows ones have the prefixes that you need, so they can't really share layers.
Yeah, unless you did this hack, but yeah, I do also feel I'm of two minds. It's really interesting. It's possible. It's probably a bad idea. So I wouldn't, I probably can't speak much to the, to the practicality of it.
Please, let's try it. I just want the context, okay?
Yeah, I mean, the fun part is that you can create these artifacts as build packages, and then they're not really, you can create them in different ways besides having pack or lifecycle do it and play around with them, and they can exist just fine. But I feel like once you start to make it a supported thing inside any of them by having pack or lifecycle generate them, then you take on a new burden of support and risk.
Okay.
So
Alright.
where maybe cache images might actually be a harder thing to start with than potentially making a multi-OS build pack first, or build package. And I'm digging up that prototype as well too. I'll send that over as soon as I find it.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, sorry to hijack the implementation sync for a little bit. But
Good to listen
Yeah.
to understand where we're headed, maybe.
Yeah, it was a perfect segue into. It was literally the same words I was going to type, although for definitely a different thing. Just as far as the questions I was going to ask about folks' thoughts on how to drive out the changes needed in image util for this cache image fix. The PR is in a very draft state. I have a commit I still need to push up that kind of removes everything, all the changes from lifecycle, with the exception of 2 lines. The idea is that in order to make it easier to make a new OS specific image, we would change the constructors for image util, which are remote.newImage or local.newImage, to now take a new option called local or remote dot with platform. And passing a platform would do 2 things. It would, if you pass it along with a from base image, that platform would say which OS of that base image to pick if it's a manifest list. And it would also, if you're not passing it that from base image option, it would tell you what sort of image, what sort of empty image to make. It would give you, so if you said new image with platform OS Windows, architecture AMD 64, it would spit you out an empty unsaved image that had those flags set and also had the Windows shim base layer. If you did it for Linux instead, you did Linux, ARM, it'd give you back an empty Linux image with no layers at all. And the nice bit that this gives you is it fits a lot with the current way that we're calling image util, or the new image constructors inside of lifecycle. It also fits nicely with the way that pack is calling image util. Since it's optional, it's a little bit easier to have a migration plan in there. A lot of places are making a new empty image and then calling set OS on it afterward, or set architecture. You don't necessarily need to, you can keep doing that if you want to. But if you pass it with platform instead, the main upshot for the driver for this is that it adds the shim base layer in there for you automatically. So you can actually start removing those pieces out of your code base. So I guess what I was going to ask is, technically we can start introducing this in lifecycle first and not require pack to use it until till whenever they want to. Wondering if that feels all right, or if there's any sort of, if we really want pack to drive out how this implementation works. I don't know how y'all feel about that, or if we have image util changes in the past that had to go lockstep with lifecycle and pack.
That whole plan sounds great to me. I feel like we can adopt it in image util, I mean, in lifecycle before pack, especially because it's like we're not making a breaking change, right? It's just an additional option, which is cool. The only question I had based on your description is that you mentioned local and remote images. And I
Mhm.
feel like for local, you kind of have to use the daemon OS. And luckily, the constructors aren't part of the image interface. So I don't actually
Mhm.
think they have to be identical anyways. Maybe like we just want this for remote.
Yeah, as I was doing the test, that definitely became true. The only thing it was useful for was architecture, potentially creating an ARM image on a AMD 64 daemon. But we could hold off on that, or we could just make it so that it's not a with platform, but it's a with architecture kind of option or something. I don't know if you had a preference there.
I think it might be friendlier to users if on the daemon side, we only provided the options to set things that would succeed.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
So
and
that'd be just with architecture, I guess, or I guess
uh,
there's OS version 2. So like maybe we want a with platform, but we just fail if it's wrong. Like that's okay as well. But
it's
just want to
technically what
ask the
it's.
question.
Yeah, that is what it's doing right now. I fail fast if they're trying to change the OS. Um, and yeah, OS version is a weird one. I was trying to find like a realistic case where you'd want to pick that, but yeah, I guess it's there. It's a field. Technically, there's also variants, and there's like 2 other fields on a platform. Related to that too, I introduced a new struct into ImageUtil, ImageUtil.platform, just so we're not copying GGCRs. I think that was a request from the original attempt at this. So there's variants, which is a string, and then there's features, which is an array of strings. All those can live next to architecture OS version, OS features too. I think that variants are usually used for ARM versions. But yeah, it becomes a pretty weird grab bag of things. One other thing related to that is GGCR in its comments for its own platform, it says that it kind of preferred to use the spec. There's a spec implementation. It has like wildcard selectors and stuff. Most of those are to support manifest list choosing. I didn't really think that would be possible because we're not really looking for like query selectors. But it did start to make me feel like maybe we're overloading things with both the manifest list preference and the default OS field. If we put everything into with platform.
Got like 85% of the way through a major image utility refactor that I promised you all a very long time ago that does address some of these problems. And then my life imploded with a bunch of other things and I didn't get back to it yet. But I feel like what you've described is a really good incremental change that we can merge now, even if we want to think about ways to change the architecture in the future. I feel like this solves our current problem and it's clean. It works well with our other stuff. We should just do it right now.
Awesome. Well, then, as most as I described is working, I'll push it up, clean up the PRs, but it's passing on pack and passing on lifecycle. Pack needed a bunch of unit test changes, but those are all fixed up. So that's ready to go, even if we want to hold off on it. Well, I'll put that up there and y'all can take a look.
Thanks, Micah.
Yeah, thank you all. Thanks for the feedback.
Thanks, Micah.
It's just for you, Anthony, actually.
Do we have anything else that we want to discuss? Call it a meeting.